started.
Lovely, thanks, Matt. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to so many of you, and a warm welcome if it's your first time. So thanks very much for joining. I'm Victoria Sprott. I have been with the Robert Half for 24 years, and I'm currently the talent director for Robert Half. So we are now in week 5 of the Future series. This week's topic is yet another fascinating one, which is the future of work. We're joined today by our expert panel. So we welcome back Emma Howard and Sheryl Miller. We've got Sam Elly. I said I was going to get it wrong, Sam. We've got Katy Tanner, and we've got Matt Weston, who some of you will have met before. So if we could just do some quick introductions. So Emma, do you want to give a quick overview of your experience and background?
Absolutely, and I'll keep this short. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn if you want the kind of the full picture. But I've got about 15 years of working both in recruitment and HR for FTSE 50 companies actually. And currently I work with individuals and businesses to kind of match skill sets, match talent, and guarantee future success.
Brilliant, thank you, Emma. And Sheryl.
Thanks, Victoria. Hey guys, so I qualified as a chartered accountant a long time ago with EY. I've kind of held quite a few finance, commercial and strategic roles, and then for the last 7 years or so I've been working as an interim, leading large-scale finance transformation and kind of major change programs. But I guess in the last sort of 2 years or so, I've moved out of the corporate space full-time to focus on coaching and mentoring individuals that want to set up businesses and follow their passions.
Brilliant, thanks, Sheryl. And Sam.
Thanks, Victoria. Hi, everybody. My name's Sam Elly. Yeah, like Sheryl, I used to work for Big Four. I used to work for Deloitte, but moved into a career in coaching facilitation, which I've been doing for the last 15 years, and now run my own business. Helping individuals, teams and organisations reach their potential. Delighted to be here. Okay,
thanks Sam. And Katy.
Hi everyone, my name's Katy, as Victoria said. I've been with Robert Half for 20 years now. My current role is within leadership development, so I focus very much on leaders and, interestingly, the future of leadership and how much that's changed over the last 12 weeks. And prior to that, I was in the field, as a recruitment consultant, as a director. So, like Sam, really interested and pleased to be here.
Okay, thanks, Katy. And Matt.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So it's Matt Weston. So I'm the UK Managing Director of Robert Half. I'm based in Bristol or London. I've been with the business 21 years, and sort of, as everyone knows, Robert Half is very strong within finance and accounting, technology and digital, as well as creative lines of business.
Okay. And Matt Robinson. So we've got 2 Matts today. Matt Robinson.
Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, so I'm Matt Robinson. I'm the Corporate Learning Manager here at Robert Half. I've been with Robert Half for just shy of 5 years, and I have got 15 years experience within the recruitment industry. So starting off as in recruitment itself, but the majority of my career within the learning and development side.
Brilliant, thanks, Matt. So, businesses and work have been challenged like never before over the last 4 months. And today we're going to explore and gain invaluable insights from our panel on what are the trends that are beginning to appear in relation to subjects like flexibility from employers, what you can expect, what's culturally changing in the workforce, what new job functions and skills are emerging, and also with regards to the leadership styles, how are they changing as a result of COVID and the last 4 months. So in order for us to gauge the thoughts and feelings of you all today and bespoke our conversation and answers to reflect this, we will be running a number of polls throughout the next hour. The question will pop up on the screen, you'll get plenty of notice, and then you just quickly choose and click the answer which is most relevant for you. So as we progress through the webinar, there's bound to be questions that are going to arise that you want to ask the panel personally. So please just submit these through the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will store them and we will be answering those questions from around about sort of 12:30. The last poll is slightly different, and we will ask you to add information about the poll into the chat function, which is a different icon, but we'll direct you to that. So Matt Robinson will collate and theme those questions within the Q&A, and we will answer as many as we can. Please be assured that your participation in the questions and the polls are totally anonymous. And the call will be recorded, as we will use it for social media postings after today. So with all that housekeeping out the way, we'll crack on with our first poll, Matt. So the first poll that we've got for you today will be, how do you currently feel about your job prospects? So you've got 4 options. You either feel confident, you feel ambivalent about it, you're feeling anxious, or you're feeling concerned. So we're just going to give you a little while to populate your answers, and Matt will give us a guidance when we'll move on.
Yeah, just give it a couple more seconds. There's still people voting at the moment.
No problems.
So let's have a look. Okay, so I'm about to end the poll. So if you haven't voted, vote now. Otherwise, there we go. I'm going to end the poll now, and I'm just going to share the results for us.
That's
okay,
great.
So you should be able to see that, Victoria.
Yeah. So similar to what we've experienced over the last few weeks, there obviously is a very significant amount of people out there and on the call today who are feeling anxious and concerned about their future. So thank you for that, Matt. So we'll move on to the questions that we would like to ask our panel today. So as we've said, there's been so much that's happened. It's difficult to really work out all of the things over the last 4 months. So what would be interesting to know is, what can people expect to have changed in the workplace during the return phase and sort of post the COVID-19 situations? And secondly, what are the predictions of the future of the office in general? So Matt, as MD of Robert Half, perhaps you can give us a perspective.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Victoria. So this is a really interesting question, and probably the question I get asked a lot by candidates, and probably facilitates most of my discussions that we have with clients. So clearly, what the future is going to look like, what the new normal is going to be, is something that everyone's looking at. I think from all the pandemic, we've realized that people can work remotely. We have the technology. We can operate virtually. So you don't physically need to go into an office to do work. I think everyone's realizing work is now, or an office is a place to connect, or a place of a community feel. So there's lots of dialogue. I know we've got a poll later of what everyone thinks is the balance, so I won't go further on what I'm seeing. But I do see that clearly clients now are understanding that they're going to need to be flexible. So from a candidate perspective, I think you've got to look at that very positively. Obviously, we just looked at the poll and there's a number of people who are concerned. I'd probably say the future of the office gives you more opportunity to be more positive, because we're seeing clients now looking at talent on a national level rather than a local or regional level. So, for example, we recently filled a couple of roles in Truro with candidates that are working out of Edinburgh. We have a very big presence in London. We have a number of people that are working in Bristol and facilitating those roles. So I think the clients are looking at being more open to what's going to happen. I think there's certain challenges that can come from that, maybe office culture, connectivity, remote management, performance management. It comes with challenges, but I do think now, the pool of opportunities is much wider for the candidate base out there. So I think from all I would say is, for those people who are a little bit worried, I think you're going to see a lot more national opportunities. With us, we're developing our database so that we can search nationwide, and we're having clients who are now focused on skill sets just as much as cultural fit. So, I think it's widening the opportunity and the scope of roles out there. So very, very exciting time. So maybe I can give some more, some insight on when we've done the poll, but that's what we're really seeing from a recruitment perspective. And I'd probably actually say, people were not open to relocation. You don't need to do that now. 60 to 70% of our opportunities that we're seeing now are clients are saying, I'm open to people being flexibly or remotely located. So I think that's a really, really good thing.
Yeah, really interesting perspective, Matt. Thank you. And Emma, would you like to sort of add to what Matt said?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to focus on the predictions part of it. I kind of feel like I should have a crystal ball here. So the first thing to say is I absolutely recognise that so many of you are feeling anxious at the moment or concerned. I completely get that, and I think it's really natural. The thing that I would really focus on is that whatever becomes of the office is not going to stay static. So I know that a lot of people have been talking about, is the office dead? Is this, it's all going to be home working from here on in? I actually don't believe that. And I think for the very reasons that Matt was just alluding to, I think the connectivity, the community that you have, and also for many of us, the ability now to get a better work-life balance, which actually often isn't possible if your home and your work blend into one. So what I predict happening from the conversations I've been having is next year, absolutely we'll focus on remote working and flexibility. And then some real, I suppose, kind of hybrid models coming out that give you, as an employee, that ability to kind of, be in the office or be at home, and try and get other ways of productivity. So, please do bear in mind this isn't static. None of us could have predicted COVID. Do I believe it's the end of the office? Absolutely not. Obviously, if you show me this in 2 years' time, we're all in our houses, I might disagree with you. But, please do bear that in mind for all of you who are feeling anxious or feeling scared or kind of being concerned about it. What we're changing to at the moment is just a fixed point in time. That will also change. So I'm seeing constant evolution in terms of what the workplace is going to look like.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Okay, so moving on to what both of you have been talking about with regards to sort of the flexibility piece. So working home is now absolutely commonplace. As companies migrate back to the offices, what sort of flexibility should be expected from job seekers and employers? So perhaps Sheryl, you could take the lead on this question.
Sure, thanks, Victoria. And I just wanted to start by just acknowledging, as Emma and Matt have done, the 80% of people on this call that are concerned or anxious, because obviously what we're not trying to do is pretend that everything's all rosy, but we do want to bring some optimism and some positivity on the call. But one of the things that I just wanted to say before I move on to talk specifically about the working from home is, something that creates anxiety and concern is uncertainty. It's things like fear of loss and fear of change. And the reality is, I think for anybody that's on this call, if you've gotten to this stage in lockdown, you've already dealt with quite a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity, and you've gotten through that. So I would just sort of say on a personal level, just remember all of that. Remember that you can cope with that uncertainty. You can cope with the ambiguity and with a very different way of working and living very quickly, which is something we've all had to adapt to. So hopefully, you kind of remember that as you continue through your job search. And then specifically around kind of the flexibility, the thing that sprang to mind for me was kind of 3 C's, and I wanted to break it down into customer need. So thinking first about our external customers of the businesses that we serve, how have their needs changed, if at all, in terms of location wise, but then also the internal customer. So a lot of us on this call are probably in business partnering sorts of roles. So you do have to think about what is your internal business customers need, in terms of collaborating, so we've all started working more remotely. What does that mean now in terms of time? So at what sorts of times does your business customer now need your support, and how flexible can you actually be around that? And then the other C that I wanted to mention was collaboration. So how easily can you and your team collaborate depending on the work that you do? It's much easier to do remotely if you know your colleagues well. So actually, if you're going into a new role, it may be less easy to kind of like build those relationships up really quickly, to mean that you can then collaborate effectively, flexibly, and also have your team got the hang of using all of the different collaboration tools and IT that's out there. And then the third C that I just wanted to leave people with was compromise. There's going to be a bit of compromise on both sides, both us if you're a candidate, and also clients as well. So you may not get your perfect blend of time and space. So I always kind of say, be really clear in terms of what your non-negotiables are, but remember that it's flexibility on both sides. It's not just a case of the employer having to be completely flexible and kind of meet all of our demands. It's give and take. So those are my thoughts, really.
Yeah, 3 C's, I like that. Thanks, Cheryl. And Katy?
I think the only things I would add to that, funnily enough, there are 2 other words beginning with C. But I think the trust element, I think if you're on this call and you're looking for, and it's going to be a new role, I think it's going to be a lot harder. I think we'll get flexibility more than ever before. I think everyone's shown the benefits of that, whether that be a productivity point of view, collaboration. I think, that's certainly been a silver lining from the pandemic. But I think, working remotely is underpinned by trust, internally, externally, and all of that. So I think my advice would be, if you're new in a role and you need to manage your internal and your own expectations, and I think that's where the compromise absolutely comes in for the customer, yourself, and the wider team. But I think there's only 2 things you can really influence that level of trust: is your character, so how you show up when you show up, and also your competence in terms of your skill set and how well you do your job. And I would just say, for anyone that's having, an interview or looking for a new role, I think the level of support and training that people are going to need, if we're still all working from home or virtually, that's going to be super important in terms of your success. Obviously, it's down to ourselves how much we put in and our own determination, let's say. But I think your leader or your manager moving forward, I think that role is going to become more important than ever before, because they're going to need to help you feel like you belong and that you matter. And that's so much harder to do remotely. So for me, that would be, if I was looking for a role right now, that would be one of the biggest things that I would be looking at. And those would be the questions that I would be asking in terms of, A, how have you onboarded successfully, but also what support and specific training do you have? So those would probably be the only extra things that I would add to what Cheryl said.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Katy. So we're going to move on to a poll, talking about the flexibility aspect. So thanks, Matt. So we're asking, how many days per week are you now comfortable working remotely? So you've obviously got a scale there between sort of 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days and 1 day, down to, I want to get back to the office every day. I don't want to see the inside of my home again. So if you were able to, populate the number of days that you are comfortable working remotely, then that would be great and will be interesting to see.
Yeah, so we've got nearly everybody voted, so just in a couple more seconds and I will end the poll. Okay.
The panel for some predictions.
We should have asked for predictions, I think. We'll be surprised.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to end the poll and I'm just going to share the results with you. Okay, there you go.
Okay, so we're looking, but not many people want to go back to the office all the time, definitely. So we've got, what, 36% at 5 days, so yeah, and 17 at 4 days. So that's, really interesting for employers to know that, that they're going to need to, provide the flexibility in order to get the talent in. So thank you very much for your participation in that. Just a reminder, questions are bound to be bubbling up in your mind as we progress through the panelists' answers. So if you've got your own question you want to submit, then please feel free to submit that through the Q&A button at the bottom. So we're going to move on to question 3, and perhaps Sam and Katy, you could take the lead on this, given the subject. So what new leadership skills have arisen recently, and what should prospective employees look for in future leaders? So Sam, do you want to sort of take that away?
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Victoria. I think anyone who's had the joys of homeschooling recently or picked up some maybe skills around having tough conversations with co-workers. But I think the interesting thing about this is when you think about arisen recently, we're in this period of complete uncertainty, or have been going through this period of uncertainty, and that's dealing with change, managing your own emotional, but also looking out for your people, as I think with the people I speak to, been the real challenge and the real upskilling they've been doing over the last few months, being ultra aware of what's going on for other people through change process. And I think that obviously at some point we'll get to some kind of normality, but I think that skill is going to be useful in the environment anyway. In terms of looking to in future leaders, I think that last poll has shown that one thing that we can look into, as Emma said, the crystal ball, and say is one shift that's going to happen is moving to more remote working. Everyone I speak to is saying that, both from an employee and an employer perspective. So for a leader, I'm not necessarily sure if they're a completely new set of skills. It's just a focus on certain skills. In my view, great leaders, on one hand support, and on the other hand challenge. So in terms of supporting remotely, you're going to have to be even more attuned to what's going on with people, because you're not going to have those informal conversations around the coffee machine. You're not going to, you lose that little bit communicating virtually, and you're going to have to make more of an effort to build relationships, going back to Katy's point about trust, to build trusted relationships to really understand what's going on for people. And the second thing on challenge is, I think the focus, if you're moving towards remote, the focus has got to be for leaders to focus on outcomes, not inputs. So to get used, presenteeism is hopefully going to move away in a remote world. So the conversations with your people about setting objectives, you've got to link objectives to your own goals as a leader, to the organizational goals, to make it really clear, have really, really crystal clear conversations about goals, create accountability, and then just allow the trust, let them get on with it in the way that works for them, which for some people will be second nature. For others, might be a bit tougher to let go.
Thanks, Sam. And Katy, have you got something?
I think the only thing that I would add to that is, and I think Sam makes a good point. I think, leaders, we've got the skills, we just may not have used them as much as others. And if you think leadership in particular in the last 12 weeks has probably gone through more change than in the last 50 years in terms of what is now being asked of them. So I think if you think about, I guess, the leadership skills that have come up, I think probably agility is the number one skill, kind of having that ability to know what to do, even when you don't know what to do, that ability to look forward, behind, to the left, to the right, and kind of take on, that anticipation of future problems and kind of ready the team. And I think what Sam said about support and challenge, I think there's this concept called a self-disruptive leader. And, from everything that I read and what research I do, is that the best leaders or the best people that you want to work for are people that challenge the status quo, the people that will look not only for putting the employees at the heart of everything, but also that ability to have those tough conversations. So someone who can really balance the tensions, but the reality of it's not going to be perfect, and it's just trying to work out, I guess, how we can best prepare ourselves for what might come. And if it doesn't come, that's absolutely fine. But it's always kind of having that natural curiosity, that evolving mindset to be ready, which I think kicks in really well to innovation, and just having that openness to new ideas, not that sticking to your guns if you make a decision. So that would probably be the only thing that I would add there.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Katy. So moving on to our next question. So with all the change, there are winners and losers in at any stage of an economic cycle. So what would be interesting to know is, what are you seeing with regards to the industries that are emerging and thriving? So again, Matt, from a Robert Half perspective, perhaps you could give us a viewpoint as to what you're beginning to see.
Yeah, so obviously, we like to see ourselves as a barometer of the marketplace. So I'd say we are 73% of job levels pre-COVID. So it's good to see that moving in the right direction. There's clearly been some winners and losers out of this. In the early stages, healthcare, pharma, biotech. We do a lot of work with software companies. We're starting to see that rise. Facilities management and FS are actually doing really well. We're also starting to see some of the industries that at the start of this coming back. We're even starting to see some from the events and entertainment and even catering industries. So I think that's really buoyed me to see them sort of coming out and coming coming back as the return phase happens. So we're seeing a lot of these, those are the kind of core industries that we're seeing at the moment. And then I can maybe answer sort of job flow, job titles I think that's the next question. I don't know if there's anything else you would add, Katie.
No, I just think you're absolutely right. I think the ones that were thriving right at the beginning, if you look at the automotive trade, that was, dying. You look at the last 4 to 6 weeks, in London in particular, no one wants to get on a train, no one wants to get on the tubes. So buying cars has gone up massively. So I think all industries will have their own cycle. To what Victoria said, whether you're in a good or a more challenging market, that will always naturally happen. I just think the companies, if you look at them irrelevant of industry, that are doing well are definitely those that are open to reimagining their processes, their technology, their people and their structures. So for me, I think it's looking at how forward proofing, if there is such a word, future proofing, let's say, they are in terms of their structure, their technology, their process and their people. Because I think if you're open to reimagining that, whether that's evolving, whether that's changing, it doesn't really, those are going to be the companies I think that will take their businesses from this kind of uncertain crisis situation, from surviving to thriving.
Cool, thank you both. Did anyone else have anything to add on the emerging industries?
Yeah, Victor, I would just add that, obviously in terms of building resilient capability, I think something that the last 4 months has shown is that companies that thought that they maybe had things like, really good disaster recovery and business continuity plans, they perhaps weren't so good. So actually, technologies that are kind of increasing capability, and also things like, looking at, which I know is something we'll talk about further, but looking at things like automation, etc. So the technology of changing businesses so that they are better equipped to deal with volatility and significant change, etc. I see sort of massive growth in those areas. As well as, I think there's actually going to be a bit of a boom for kind of local niche industries as well, because, as people come into city centres less and come into things like business parks less, I've seen it kind of with my own eyes, where I've seen, little market towns like Bridge North bustling and actually more busy than Birmingham city centre, as an example, in the day. So it's going to be quite interesting, actually, I think, for sort of some SMEs and sort of smaller businesses as well.
Yeah, no, really encouraging to hear. Thank you. So on a similar sort of vein, with regards to the job functions, what trends are you seeing, and again, what you anticipate in the near future?
So maybe I'll kick this one off. I think we're seeing a huge focus on data. The analytics that companies need and are looking at, that are driving business decisions. So huge volume. Alone we've had 6 interim FP&A roles. We've placed more FP&A directors than we've ever done, and again, all been done remotely. We're seeing a lot of work within technology and ERPs. We're seeing everyone continue with them. So there's been huge demand in Dynamics 365, SAP HANA, Oracle Fusion, NetSuite. So we're seeing a lot of those, and that's from a finance and accounting perspective. We're seeing a lot of the technology projects continue as well. There's a lot of work being done in working capital, cash management, and also maybe at the more lower levels on the collections and accounts receivable. We're running huge projects where everyone's just worried about cash flow, debtor days. So there's a big opportunity there. And we're still continuing to see normal, or increased numbers coming back in financial management accounting. There's still year end that needs to be done. So we're still seeing a number of projects. And I talk more about finance and accounting here because I think that's the demographic on this call. But in our creative lines, we're doing a lot of work at URX and URI. The digital agenda is huge because obviously everyone's, pushing their technology, online presence. So there's huge opportunities in those roles as well. So I think I would just probably say the core, if I was to sort of put it down to the 3 top things at the moment, cash management, working capital, FP&A and data, analytics, and ERP.
Thanks, Matt. And Katie, have you got any other things that you
think maybe new job functions, but I do think, I read a paper probably only last week from Deloitte. I do think that contingency workers we're going to start seeing an increase of. I definitely think that will aid companies from a flexibility point of view. I think companies are going to be reviewing their own infrastructure. They're going to be looking for skills gaps, critical skills gaps. So I think people will go out and specifically proactively hire for those. So the only thing that I would probably add to that is I think as people are now in the return phase and are probably realistically, with furlough starting to change, I think we will start to see definitely a rise with contingent workers, which, a silver lining of that would be that will help everyone diversify their own skill set, make them perhaps more attractive in the future of work in terms of skill sets that people will need. But that would probably be the only trend that I would anticipate that I think will come over the next month, 3 months, 6 months.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Katie. So we're going to have one more question before we have our sort of last poll that we discussed earlier. So maybe Emma and Sam, if you might be able to take the lead on this one. So with regards to sort of the demand of new skills that are arising, perhaps you can give your viewpoint on that.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of kick this off with something I think that's important to kind of think about. Matt and Katie talked us through the kind of areas that people are looking at. So I'm not talking about kind of technical skills here. I think, we need to all bear in mind that in a world where there are more applicants for jobs at the moment, the skills that are really coming into play now are kind of almost the value-added ones for me. So having kind of spoken to some people in my network at the moment, the three that came up were flexibility as number one. So I think back to Sheryl and Katie's point around what are you actually giving to the organisation rather than you simply demanding. Empathy was another that came out really strongly, actually. So, in a world where we are all working remotely, the ability and the skill to be able to influence people, through different ways of working, through that empathy and through recognising what other people are going on is a really key one. And then the last one that came out very strongly for me was insight. So, in a world where a lot of people can do a certain job, the skill or the ability to actually take it to that next level is what people are looking for. And that came out really strongly for me because, I think, although at the moment it feels like a buyer's market for employers, and there are lots of candidates out there, that isn't always going to be the case. We are expecting a V-shaped recovery, and we're expecting this to look quite different even in 6 months to 12 months time. So from the employers that I've spoken to, certainly what they're looking to do is get the most out of the people they hire at the moment. This isn't a bums on seat job. This is actually what else are you bringing there, and that's a fantastic opportunity for many of you who perhaps are looking for new work and kind of want to expand your skills or really bring a new level of skills into roles that potentially haven't had them. But yeah, those three for me, flexibility, empathy, and insight, are the ones that have come out when I've spoken to people. Sam, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I agree. I find myself kind of internally nodding along to that. I think, there's two sides. There's the behaviour, there's the skills, which was explicitly mentioned, and then the kind of mindset that people are going to be looking for. And the only skills I'd add would be about discipline, and I mean that in a couple of ways. Almost, if we're going to be working more remotely, you need to have a discipline to be able to work, in a more balanced way, and also not take too much on. There's speaking to a lot of clients at the moment, there used to be this idea of working remotely, working from home, parentheses. Actually, I'm finding that most people are finding they're doing more at home, and they're finding it harder to switch off. They haven't got a virtual commute. They haven't got time spent to go and get coffee. Everything is kind of piling up, and actually having the discipline. No employer now wants someone who's going to burn themselves out. So having the discipline, not just working effectively, but getting the balance right to make sure they're not putting themselves under stress. And I think mindset at the moment, there's a real press for people who have got a kind of mindset which is, thriving in change. And we all say we can do it. If in an interview, how do you respond to change? I love change. But actually, there's a book recently called Anti-Fragile, and it really talks about the people that are able to really thrive in periods of change and come out stronger. And I think this change uncertainty is obviously big at the moment. It's going to carry on. And so those people who can come out of it change stronger I think it's going to really be a differentiator for people in the job market.
Mm. Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to do the last poll slightly different, in as much as what we're going to ask you is, from what key skills will you want to develop personally to help towards the future, your future of work. So your answers are gonna, if you could put those in the chat, they are confidential and anonymous, so don't worry. But if you can submit those questions through there. But I think we're gonna move on, Matt, to some open Q&A now, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, I will just give people a chance to put some information in the chat as well. But okay, so one question I've got here, and I'm not sure who to pass this to. We've talked a lot about working remotely, but very much from the sort of candidate side. So from talking to employers, how are they feeling about teams working remotely? As in, it might be what employees want, which we saw from the poll, but do clients really want this? And Emma, I can see you got your hand up. Pass to you.
Yeah, I have. And this was a conversation actually Sheryl and I were having this morning in some of the work that we do together. Working remotely is not a panacea for the challenges that the workforce face at the moment. And I think what we have seen, and certainly I've spent a long time working in large businesses with stakeholders and line managers. We have line managers who do not know how to manage when they are face-to-face, let alone at a remote distance. So yes, there is some real nervousness around it, and that's why there's a lot of work that internal HR teams and HR suppliers need to do to help. I think Katy referenced it, to really help line managers get up to speed to be able to manage remotely. I think there's some clarity that needs to come around, what are the jobs that need to be done and what does that look like? And I think we are going to be seeing some real gaps in the market around that leadership ability. The other thing I would say, however, is, and I need to kind of stress this point, for all of us, remote working is not a given. And I was having this conversation with a client of mine the other day who was insistent she wasn't going to go into her place of work anymore. It is actually part of the contract unless it's been renegotiated, and actually she does leave herself wide open for dismissal if she doesn't do that. And I can see Katy's nodding with me because we have to think about this as a legal piece. So do people feel nervous about it on a client side? From my perspective, yes, both legally and behaviourally. And is that why I really emphasise, I think we will see a surge in home working, and I think we'll see a levelling out over the next year and a half, because it doesn't work for every business, it doesn't work for every organisation. And if anyone else has got anything they want to add there, because
the only thing I would add, you said it really well, is it's not a right, and I think we need to be really careful. Absolutely, I think it's how you position yourself. I think it's been without a doubt one of the silver linings. I think to Sam's point, we all get a lot more done, but that balance is really important. But I think it's managing expectations for yourself as an employee and also for the employer. Are some jobs more easier to do at home remotely? Absolutely. But I don't think we can take away the place of the office. And I hope and predict that, to Emma's point, I think we'll see a huge spike. But as people gradually go back, hopefully we will have, I would say, is a hybrid sense of working where there will be trust. If you need to be at home for a delivery or something like that, absolutely, it's a given. But equally, there's flexibility on the other end, that if you need to be in the office, you're there. It can't just be a flat, no, I'm not going back to work. To Emma's point, that's what your contract is. Your contract didn't change during COVID.
And I would... one of the things that I'm seeing as we speak to our clients, I think some of the numbers that we're talking about, I think most clients, from what I speak to and I hear, I think everyone's looking at maybe 3 in the office, 2 out of the office, or, I think they are open to 3 out of the office, 2 in the office. But I think, I just want to reiterate that point, that they still want the connectivity. They want the office environment to be an office of connectivity, but still have an accountability to colleagues and their clients and everyone they work with. So I think that's what we're seeing. So I think we're a long way off 5 days out of the office.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so another question we've got come in is, will the automation of jobs speed up post the pandemic? I don't know who to pass that one to. Cheryl, maybe?
Yeah, sure. I think that might be our next question anyway. But yeah, I mean, obviously, so in my interim role, so over the last sort of 7 years or so, I've spent a lot of time working on finance transformation, as I was saying. So automation is a key part of that. I mean, interestingly, and I think just to be really pernickety about the wording, it's automation of processes and tasks and activities rather than jobs per se. But that's just being really picky. But thinking about it, we've actually been doing automation for years. It's just that now, obviously, we've got robotic process automation. But things like, you know, optical character recognition of invoices back in the day, that was also a form of automation. So it's really not as kind of like scary and daunting as it may seem. I think it's just the word robots that makes it sound worse. I think definitely, whereas clients were maybe a little bit reluctant to take the plunge, I think having realised that having a big offshore, workforce that are still kind of doing manual processes doesn't work in a situation like this. And obviously, you know, the risk of this sort of thing happening again is there. So actually, you know, businesses realise that they have to automate some of these processes if they want to be resilient. But obviously, at the same time as removing the need for certain manual processes, it does therefore create new opportunities and new jobs. So things like, being able to manage and understand and improve processes, which actually takes humans to do that. You know, so we need, business analysts and subject matter experts that understand the process. And that's the sort of resource that I often used to actually quite struggle to hire. You know, good process experts with a finance background, they're actually sort of not that easy to get hold of. People that can really understand exceptions to process, root cause analysis, data scientists, all of those sorts of roles are kind of new opportunities in that space that kind of sit really comfortably actually with automation. So it's not a case of one or the other, is what I'd say.
And Matt, I'd add to, you know, Cheryl summed that up brilliantly. And I think we are definitely, it's not job replacement, it's job displacement. We're seeing more opportunities created. You know, a couple of years back, it was all about offshoring. Now we're talking to more clients about reshoring than ever. And fin processes are massive. We've got a number of projects that we're running with P2P, R2R, order to cash. To Cheryl's point of, you know, needing really good business analysts, I think that's creating a lot more demand. And I think, you know, whilst some of the processes, the manual ones or monotonous ones are being replaced, people are still wanting to use humans, you know, as part of the process. You know, business partnering, stakeholder management is bigger than ever.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Cheryl. So we've had a couple of questions on a very similar sort of vein. So it's more to do with, I think, comments that we mentioned maybe from yourself earlier, Matt, about how the pool is much wider for opportunity for candidates now, because obviously people can, recruit not necessarily in the sort of city that they're in, but people are working remotely. But the kind of questions we're looking at here is from a financial perspective. You know, how do clients cover the differences in living costs, say London versus Manchester? But also, you know, does it mean that it's going to be better from a financial point of view and quality of life for the candidates? And I know, Emma, you wanted to pick up on one of these, and if I want to start with Emma and then pass over to you, Matt, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I wasn't ready for that. I hadn't unmuted myself. I was ready for Matt to talk much more knowledgeably. So one of the questions that we had come through was really around, you know, I suppose almost whether we feel that employers are going to be taking advantage financially of employees at the moment. And the thing I'd really like to stress to all of you, particularly those of you who are, you know, feeling worried or concerned at the moment, is you have your own personal boundaries that you put around in terms of the money that you need to earn and the kind of the budgets that you work within. There may be some occasions where you feel that you want to take what is a pay cut if the alternative is not working. Maybe some occasions that you hold out, and that's where working with an organisation like Robert Half is fantastic to really give you, you know, that information. I think we need to remember that for employers, they have to respond to the marketplace. Where we've seen massive pay increases is because we've seen a lack of people. So if you are accepting, you know, basically minimum wage, yes, there is something wrong. Do we, however, expect there to be a bit of a flexibility from both sides? I would expect so, yes. And remembering again, I know my theme for this talk has been incremental change. It may well be that at the moment, if you're out of work and you're desperate for a new role, you take something that is a different salary, but you then work up and you move to something else in the next kind of year and a half. And I certainly, that's how I'm, kind of expecting it to work, rather than us feeling that we're being taken advantage of by employers. But I'd be keen to hear what Matt thinks on that.
I'd just say we are seeing more, people looking at talent on a national level. We are still working through how that looks from a remuneration perspective, because still people are, most offices aren't back yet. So we haven't really sort of seen, we've seen clients expensing anyone that's needed to travel. What I am hearing clients talk about is, I think that they're in partnerships with their HR teams and their remunerations teams around operating different models. I spoke to a client today who's going to operate 3 models: fully remote, hybrid, and fully in the office. And I think that they'll look at their compensation and their travel arrangements. So we're going to see a lot more of that. But I just, I don't see that being a problem at all, because I think if you look at our business, one of our biggest costs is real estate. And if we can get people working remotely, so therefore we can minimize our footprint, then we can remunerate people, for them working at home or expensing it. It's going to work out significantly cheaper than, we've got, an office in the Shard for 200 people, and I was the only one working there last Friday. And when you pay, best part of $1 million a year and no one's in it, then you get a bigger return on, operating a remote or hybrid model. So I think you'll see a lot more of that coming, but we don't have it defined, that has been fully defined yet.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Emma. Okay, another question here is, can you suggest a strategy for a career change, picking up new skills, or even planning to start your own business? Sheryl, I'm sort of looking at you here. Maybe pass over to you on this one.
Sure. I mean, in terms of where to start, I think in terms of strategy for career change, I think you have to start with an audit. Obviously, because I'm a finance person, you have to start with an audit of who you are and where you are, if that makes sense. So what is important to you? What do you enjoy doing and what are you good at? And it's that combination that you start with. And whether you do that in terms of self-work, whether that's kind of just some self-reflection or going through your CV, or whether you speak to, if you've got a coach, get a coach, or if it's the guys at Robert Half or whoever, but just do some sort of audit on yourself just to kind of figure out, what's important to you. And then, try to then kind of frame that in terms of the opportunities that are out there, of which there are many. And I think it was something I spoke about in the last webinar, but if you are struggling to think about the sorts of opportunities, again, either the people at Robert Half can help, or you may have peers or mentors within your sector that really understand the types of jobs, the types of roles. I mean, I know from a finance perspective, and I'm not sure what the background is, but from a finance perspective, the myriad of jobs, whether that's controller roles and kind of more accounting and technical, or whether it's kind of like audit, or whether it's business partnering, or it's FP&A, and there's all sorts of avenues that you could go down. So there's something about understanding the breadth of the opportunities that you can go once you're clear on what it is you want to do and what you're bringing to the party. And then I think the second part of the question was around starting your own business. So really it's the same skills will transfer over. I guess the only thing that I'd probably add even more so in terms of starting your own business is what have you kind of got a passion for? So what do you actually love doing? Because when you're kind of doing your own thing, you probably have a little bit more leeway to kind of just go with your gut and be way more sort of creative and wacky. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Sheryl. Thanks very much. Okay, so a couple of other questions here. Has there been an increase in interim assignments from employers looking to accelerate the types of changes we've been talking about? I suppose, Matt, maybe pass to you on that one.
Yeah, so we are starting to see more interim assignments. I must admit, I thought we would have seen it quicker, but I think that's reflective of people feeling maybe a little bit uncomfortable going to interims whilst they've been furloughing people. I think there's been a moral and ethical dilemma there. But, we are seeing sequential weekly movement on our interim business now. Interim, it was perm. Perm didn't slow as much as we thought. And perm is moving nicely, but temp really took a while, but it's starting to come through now. And so we're seeing faster growth on our temp lines of business. I think everyone's going to start pulling in interim support. what we're predicting and what the patterns and themes show us is, I think, September, October, November, I think will be very, very big for interim. I think, as we come out of the suspended animation of what furlough does to you, I mean, I think people, as I said, are unsure what to do. We are seeing more projects now, more people forging ahead, people getting back into offices, more confidence coming into the marketplace. And I would say for anyone who, is concerned or worried, you've got to be looking at interim work. It gives you breadth, it gives you depth. People are more flexible on looking at interims. They look for, it's more of a date, not a marriage. They look for something, they look for someone on an interim basis quicker. They're not as picky as they are on the perm basis. And I keep always saying this, 60% of interims go perm. It's a great opportunity to get your foot in the door of a company, different exposure, different experience. It's something that it would be remiss not to explore.
Thanks, Matt. And a similar theme here as well. Are employers still keen on industry experience? I know we've talked about that earlier, or are they looking at transferable skills? So if you're looking to change industries, are people still wanting that or not? I don't know who wants to pick that up.
Well, I can maybe kick this off. I think, in certain, there's always going to be the need for technical skills. We do a lot of work with software companies. They need revenue recognition, for example. But I think clearly I think people are now looking for more the softer skills rather than the harder skills. I think the interpersonal skills, the ability to adapt, to be flexible, resilience, grit. I think that people are seeing more of that or wanting more of that because we're in an ever-changing environment. So I would absolutely say there's always going to be an element where they need the technical skills, but I'm seeing more, and that would probably be 10 to 20% of jobs. I think 80% of jobs now are about the potential of the individual.
Brilliant, thanks, Matt. Victoria, I think we've probably got time for one more question, maybe two. But we've got a question here about how do we achieve a day job with a side hustle? Okay, so I don't know who would like to pick that one up. Cheryl?
I think maybe.
I'll join you afterwards, Cheryl. You go first.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So side hustle, for those of you that maybe haven't heard the term, it is obviously it's a business, or it's sometimes referred to as a side business, and it's something that I know a lot of people have done. Well, it's a term that I've been using for a few years anyway, but I know somebody that started a side business, a side hustle just before lockdown, and was actually made redundant well before the lockdown, and then actually has now the side hustle that she has, which was actually a lovely cake business. And we all know actually in recession, one of the types of businesses that thrive is actually cakes and sweet treats and lingerie, but we won't go into that one because people are still treating themselves. So actually her business has absolutely grown massively. How do people achieve that? The thing that I would say is that the thing that's most important is if you have to work smart. Because obviously what you don't want to do is just create for yourselves two jobs and a lot of headache and stress. So you've got to be pretty smart in terms of you've got to delegate and outsource. There are certain websites and tools that just become your friend where you can quite quickly get things done, like flyers and brochures and marketing and advertising and stuff like that. I think the other thing is you have to do what you love. So the lady that did the cake business, she's actually a qualified accountant, so her background is commercial finance business partnering, but she loves baking, so that's what she started doing as a business, something that she's actually going to scale. I also know somebody who's a very experienced facilities manager who has a business called Darn and Dance, which again, very profitable business that she grows on the side. The other thing I do is maybe think about teaching what you know. So, we've got a lot of accountants on, and actually the one thing that my daughter always says to me, she says, you should go and teach Excel, on one of these. Of course, I can't think of anything less exciting, but people will actually pay to be taught things like Excel, and other technical skills. There's a couple of websites that I'll mention. So the one is Skillshare, which is probably more kind of artsy and crafty, and the other one is teachable or thinkific. And if you have got skills, you know, like Excel, like even, for example, pulling together really good PowerPoint presentations, which as finance people, we have developed these sorts of skills, you can actually, you know, make some money on the side from doing things like that. So just a couple of ideas there for you, really. But I think it has to be something that you love doing, basically.
Yeah. And I just add in there, you know, kind of Sheryl and I work together a lot, and my kind of focus would be on making sure that you are understanding what it is that you're not getting from your current workplace, and making sure that your commitment there doesn't falter, because it's really difficult to balance the two. And what you don't want to have happen at the moment is that, you know, the actual work that you're paid for on a day-to-day basis becomes at odds with what you kind of want to do. But this is a fantastic time to start thinking about what you want your job to look like in the next 5 years, and to start that transition.
Thanks, Emma. And we've got one more question, Victoria, I think, before we finish or close out. So somebody's written here, it's notable that due to automation, most of the jobs are moving to IT experts. What are your comments? I know, Sheryl, I think you did say you'd like to answer that question.
Yeah, just really quickly. And it's just because I have led the sorts of programs that look at automation. And I would say, certainly in my experience, when it comes to finance, because finance you do need that element of the technical, as in accounting knowledge, as well as the IT. So there are always jobs there for finance people that understand process, that understand how to improve things, that understand financial risk, etc. So, you know, that I know some people have mentioned in the chat some of the skills that they're looking at are things around projects, because that's definitely, if you can combine that as a skill set, it's really powerful.
Thanks, Sheryl. Thanks very much. So, Victoria, I think I'll pass back to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problems. Well, thank you, everybody, for what is again a fascinating discussion around the areas of future of work. And I say it would be interesting to run it again in another 3 and 6 months' time to see how some of our predictions may have come true, and how those trends have changed. So, some of the key takeaways that I've got personally from this, we had, between Katy and Sheryl, we've now got the 5 C's. So we've got, thinking about your customer, the collaboration element, your compromise, and, looking at your character and competence. From lots of conversations from many of you, the office is clearly not, going to be dead, but it is going to be very different. And we can expect from our employers a degree of flexibility in all sorts of guises. And certainly, from what Matt and many have said, that there are some really positive trends out there with regards to emerging industries and skills and job functions. So, I hope for those who are concerned about your future, that's given you some, some hope and confidence that things are moving in the right direction. And, I love the side hustle piece. If you're going to do it, you've got to do what you love. So I think maybe that might be a poll that we do one day, just to see what everyone's true love is under there. So, first of all, I really appreciate everybody's time. So Emma, Sheryl, Katy, Sam and Matt, as ever, great advice, and appreciate the time taken out. Next week's webinar is Securing Your Next Role, where we're going to look at structuring CV, putting together covering letter, masterclass, looking at your attributional style, how to master the psychometric testing in your applications. So really hope that you've enjoyed today, but also really hope that you will join us next week for what will be another fascinating discussion. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Have a great day.
And you. Bye-bye. Bye.